Hello listeners, this video discusses about The Lady from the Sea written by Henry Ibsen. Let's see about Henry Ibsen. His full name is Henry Johan Ibsen. He is born in the year 1828 and died in 1906. He was a Norwegian Danish playwright and a theatre director. He is one of the most influential playwrights of his time, and he is often referred to as the father of realism. His major works include Brand, Peer Gynt, An Enemy of the People, Emperor and Galilean, A Doll's House, Hedda Gabler, Ghosts, The Wild Duck, When We Dead Awaken, Rosmer Sholem, and The Master Builder. And after Shakespeare, Ibsen is the most influential performed dramatist. Ibsen wrote all his plays in Danish, which is the commonly written language of Denmark and Norway during his time. And they were all published by a Danish publisher house named Glidendal. Let's see the characters of the play. Doctor Wangel. Dr. Wangel is a local doctor from a small holiday town in northern Norway. He has been married and his wife has passed away several years before the play has begun. He then remarries Ellida. Next character is Ellida. Ellida is the second wife of Dr. Wangel. She was the daughter of lighthouse keeper and she grew up in Skaldvik. For bathing, she every day visits the sea, that is in local fjord. Fjord is a narrow piece of sea between cliffs, especially in Norway. Ellida is named after a ship of Frithjof, which was from Frithjof's sages. This Frithjof's sages is a long story from Iceland. Her name Eld is taken from Old Norway and that means fast going ship. Her husband Dr. Wangel describes her as nervous energy. Next is Bolet. Bolet is Dr. Wangel's daughter from his first wife. Bolet, she takes care of her father soon after her mother's death. She also expresses her desire to get away and learn about the world. But she's always been responsible for her father. Next character is Hildi. Hildi is Wangel's second daughter from his first wife. Next is Arnholm. He is Bollet's former tutor and Elida's former suitor partner. Next is Hans Lindstrand. He is young, naive and fragile. He is an aspiring sculptor. Next character is Balstead. He is a middle-aged painter. Next is the stranger. He is a mysterious American who symbolically married Ellida many years before the play begins. Let's have an overlook of the play. The Lady from the Sea. The Sea is a play written in the year 1888, which is written in 5 acts. The play is set in a place in a small fjord town in northern Norway and it depicts the life of Ellida Wangel. The meaning of fjord is in physical geography, it's a long, deep, narrow body of water that reaches far inland. In simple terms, fjord is a U-shaped valley with steep walls of rock on either side. Ellida Wangel, she is in love with the sea. She chooses either to stay on land with her husband or she wants to sail in the seas with her former lover. The full name of Dr. Wangel is Doctor Edvard Wangel. The play actually opens in the house of Doctor Edvard Wangel with his 2 daughters, Bolet and Hildi. As the play begins, the 2 daughters, they decorate the garden with flowers in order to remember their mother's birthday, who died several years ago. The play's main protagonist is Ellida Wangel. These daughters actually, they wait for Dr. Arnholm to celebrate or to remember their mother's birthday. Dr. Arnholm, he was once infatuated with the main protagonist, Ellida Wangel. The marriage between Doctor Wangel and Ellida Wangel is a strained relationship. They only focus on convenience, not on kindness. They both together had a son, but he died when he was a baby. Dr. Arnholm, he already proposed Ellida Wangel before 10 years. But Ellida Wangel, she rejects him because she says that she was in love with somebody else at that time. As the play begins, there was a conversation about Elda's love affair, but she was interrupted by Lindstrand. Lindstrand is a deadly ill patient of Dr. Wangel. Lindstrand, he expresses his desire to make a sculpture of a sleeping woman who lost her lover boy by draining him at sea. As Lindstrand expresses his desire, Elda, she remembers about her past lover and narrates her story to her husband. Elda says that she was engaged to a sailor who murdered his captain during his escape. He meets Elda and tells Elda to wait for him as he will return for her. Few days later, she writes to him, but he never responds and she assumes that he is dead. But he appears again later in her life and tells Elda that he is born to her and forces her to make a choice between him and her husband. Now, Elda tells her that he will come back the next day before his ship takes off. Elda is confused as her love for the sea, for freedom, for adventure, and for a passionate life tells her to go with the stranger. Because Elda, she believes that there's nothing that makes her happy in her current life. Because of this, they had a small argument, and she tells her husband that he cannot stop her from leaving. Also expresses that he cannot stop her from choosing on her own will. Now the stranger decides the same thing and tells her that he cannot take her with him by force. Now the choice is left to Elda. She must decide between her past lover and her current husband. Meanwhile, Dr. Armhole, he proposes Bollet. Bollet is the doctor of Dr. Wangel. Dr. Armholm, after knowing the greatest wish of Bollet to travel around the world, he invites her to travel the world with him. At first, when Dr. Armholm proposes to Bollet, she refuses. But after realizing that this is the only chance to leave her home, she accepts his proposal. And Dr. Horn, he promises her that he will respect her and love her in future. The play ends when the stranger comes back for Elda and she announces her decision, saying that she has chosen to stay with her husband and tells the sailor to leave. She affirms to the sailor, saying that she and Dr. Wangel will reconcile and promise to work on their marriage, and they'll try to be happier together and to learn to love one another and their children. Let's see the plot summary. There's no real affection between Ellida Wangel and her two stepdaughters Boletta and Hilda. So as I said earlier, Ellida marries Dr. Wangel, who is the father of Boletta and Hilda, whose wife is also dead several years before. As Ellida loved to loiter near the sea area, even her home is next to the sea. There she meets Dr. Wangel in the sea coast town that was near her home. The area around her house is surrounded by mountains and waters, and the scenery around her house dominated her life. When the two daughters remember and share their mother's birthday with other invitees, Arnhall, who is Belinda's former tutor, he pays a visit to Wangel's home. There he finds Ellida, whom he proposed earlier before her wedding to Doctor Wangel, but she had refused his proposal because she was already betrothed to another. As Arnhold and Ellida talk about their past, there was a person named Lindstrand. He is a sculptor. He stops them in between, interrupts them, and talks about the model, talks about the vision that he has on making a sculpture of a sleeping woman and her lost love who drowned at sea. Then Lindstrand, he narrates a story when he was at sea, where he met a sailor who told him a strange story. The story goes like this. The sailor had married a woman who had promised to wait for him, but 3 years later, he had read that his wife had married another man. The sailor also adds Lindstrand that even though the woman has moved away from him and married to another man, he still thinks of her even though she had broken her vows. This strange tale, narrated by Lindstrand, moves Ellida. It threatens her. She becomes upset after hearing it, and which makes her husband think that she is unhappy because she is away from the sea. Because after the wedding, Wangel takes her to his house. Now he offers to move with his family to the seashore so that Ellida can regain her peace of mind. But Ellida very well knows that even if she moves back to the seashore, she would not regain her happiness, whereas it certainly would make him and his daughters unhappy to leave their home. She now narrates her past to her husband. She now says the cause of her mystery. Some years before, she had come under the spell of a sailor whose ship was in port for only a few days. He too had a strong desire on sea, similar to Ellida, and seemed to be a part of the sea. But the sailor has murdered his captain and he is forced to flee. Now, before he leaves, he took a ring from his hand and one from Elda's hand. He joined them together and threw them into the sea. Now he tells her that this act joins them in marriage and that she was to wait for him. At that moment, the act of the sailor impressed Ellida, but later she regained her senses and wrote to tell him that she did not consider the joining of the rings to be their wedding oaths. In order to sustain the wedding, the sailor ignored her letters. However, he continued to tell her that he would come back to her. Now, after this, Ellida marries Doctor Wangel and he becomes pregnant with his child. Even after marrying Wangel, she felt the closeness of the sailor with her. And later, when she found that her relationship is a guilt, that she has not lived with her husband as his wife, she suffers with mental pain and she fears that she will go mad. She then starts to love her husband, but she is drawn to the man of the sea, whom she has not seen in 10 years. After listening to her narration, Dr. Wangel tries to comfort his wife, but he is also worried about her sanity. Few days later, one day, a stranger appears in their garden. He is a sailor who has come to claim Ellida. He tells her that he has come to hold her to the oath she had taken years before with him. Ellida says that she would never leave her husband, but the stranger does not listen to her. Then the doctor tells the man that he will never allow his wife to leave him and that the stranger cannot force her to go against her will and all that. The stranger responds saying that he would never force her against her will. He says these words, of her own free will. When Ellida hears this statement, she becomes fascinated and she repents for her mistake that she has done both for her husband and to the sailor. Now the stranger leaves the place saying that he will return for her answer the next night, and if she refuses to join with him, then she will never see him again. Ellida, she begs her husband to save her from the stranger. He tries to persuade her that her mind has been controlled by Lindstrand's story of the sailor and his unfaithful wife, and he also reminds her that the sailor does not even look as she had remembered him. Ellida concludes that there's only one way that she can make the right decision and save her sanity. She brings the condition saying that the doctor must release her marriage oaths not by divorce but verbally, so that she will be free to choose between her husband and the stranger. She also admits saying that she has never been free. For first time she was under the will of the stranger, and then after her marriage she has been under the will of her husband. But the doctor refuses to accept this condition because he thinks that the stranger would harm her. Also, he feels that the stranger exerts an evil influence over her. So he tries to convince her and promises her, saying that after the stranger leaves, he will release her from her marriage oath to him and give her the freedom that she wishes. The next night, the stranger comes again as promised, and Ellida and her husband meet him again in the garden. Now, when the stranger asks Ellida to come with him of her own free will, the doctor orders the stranger to leave the country or he will expose him or murder him. Now the stranger says that he himself has a pistol with him and says that he will use it to take his own life rather than giving up his freedom. Now Ellida again argues with her husband that he must release her from her wedding vows. Now the husband thinks that he cannot hold her soul and her desire, and so he releases her from her commitment to him. Ellida understands that he loves her enough to put her happiness above his own. She turns to the stranger who is pleading with her to leave with him on the ship that is standing offshore and tells him that now she can never go with him. The stranger now understands and realizes that there's something between these two that is more stronger than his own will. He leaves them. He also promises them that he will never return. The play concludes as Ellida assures her husband that her mind is now whole once more and that she will never again long for the stranger at the sea. She also says that no longer no one has any power over her, and now she wholeheartedly joins with her husband and wanted to live with him again as his wife. She also realizes that she can win the affection of his daughters. Let's see the themes in the play. First is duty, second responsibility, the position of women, and the past that affects the future. Hope this video helped you. Subscribe to this channel for more videos. Thank you for watching.